Okay, so getting back into our coverage over the X-Men, as you know, we had just wrapped up X-Men Inferno, and now we are going to work our way up to Days of Future Present. Now, before we are able to properly dive into that crossover, we have to cover a lot of different books from all the different X titles around that time in Marvel Comics. You are talking about like Excalibur, New Mutants, X Factor, Uncanny X-Men. You also had the Wolverine solo series. And there are some titles I did not mention we're going to cover down the road. Now, today's video is only going to focus on one book, and that would be Excalibur number 8. And the reason why, because Excalibur number 8 is used as a way to begin the process of moving us away from X-Men Inferno and getting us ready for what's to come down the road for this team leading into Days of Future Present. Another reason why I really want to focus on Excalibur number 8 is because it really shows that the team is still trying to deal with the idea of what they went through when it came to X-Men Inferno. Not all the members, but most of them, they still feel kind of weird about what happened in that event. Because remember, when it came to Inferno, all 4 X titles were involved, except when it came to Excalibur, they only had 2 chapters. And by the time their chapters had ended, the entire event had ended. And on top of that, when it came to Excalibur, they didn't cross over with the other X titles. They didn't fight alongside with the X-Men or X Factor or at least the New Mutants. They were on their own, and they still had no idea what exactly happened when it came to that particular event. And so some members, they went through a lot and are still kind of questioning what they just went through. But now we can jump into Excalibur number 8 properly, where we pick up with Captain Britain freaking out. Now here's the reason why he's freaking out, because he's still thinking about the whole X-Men Inferno event, believing that his team has just been kidnapped, because he woke up so late into the day, the rest of the team had already left the hotel to go take care of some things. But he does not know that, so he believes that his team has been kidnapped until he finds some notes that were left behind by each member, telling him where they all went to. When it comes to Rachel, she went out of her way to go pay a visit to her baby brother, Christopher. When it comes to Kitty Pryde, she went back home to the school of Charles Xavier. When it comes to Nightcrawler, he went to California to get a jet for the team. But then you have Captain Britain realize there was no note left behind for Megan. And around this time in Marvel Comics, him and Megan were dating, but he was beginning to move away from her and getting back with his ex-girlfriend, Courtney Ross. But either way, he still has some concerns for her, wondering where in the world did she go to. And so he does change clothes to go find her. Now, when he does fly out of his hotel room, we get one panel with Clark Kent and Lois Lane. Now, here's the thing. They're drawn like Clark Kent and Lois Lane, but they don't have their last names. They call each other by their first name, just Clark and Lois, and that is it. And I kind of found that cool, but either way, we move on with the story. But now we have to shift our focus over to the one person on Excalibur that was heavily affected by the whole Inferno event, and that would be Megan. Now remember, when it came to X-Men Inferno, when Excalibur arrived in New York was already deep into the Inferno event. But her and Nightcrawler were confronted by Nastir. When it came to Nastir, he had turned Megan into the Goblin Princess, who then tried to kill off the rest of her team. Now, she was stopped by Shadowcat, but for Megan, it just hurts her so much to think that she had almost killed off her entire team, especially Captain Britain, the man she loves. Oh, by the way, she's also beginning to fall in love with Nightcrawler as well. Now we see her on the beach at the moment, and we see her crying. And then she is confronted by a group of women. Now, these women realize that she is crying about something, and they're going out of their way to help her, to cheer her up. And they say, hey, you know what? Come with us. We'll take care of you and make sure you feel better by the end of the day. Now we shift our focus over to Kitty Pryde, and you have Kitty Pryde heading over to the school of Charles Xavier. Now remember, at the tail end of the X-Men Inferno event, we saw the school get blown up by Mr. Sinister when he was battling against X-Factor and also the X-Men. Now once you had our heroes being able to stop him, they all left school like that and went on with their lives. But shortly after, the New Mutants came back home and realized that their home has been destroyed. But either way, you have the Young Mutants trying to clear the area up. But then out of nowhere, they're confronted by Kitty Pryde, who's very upset with them. Because back in Fall of the Mutants, the second X-Men crossover, at the tail end of that event, Cypher died, one of the members of the New Mutants, who was very close to Kitty Pryde. And that is why she's very upset with the team, because to Kitty, they're reckless. Now, when it comes to Kitty, she also blames the New Mutants for other things as well. So, for example, she blames them for what happened to Magic, who was recently de-aged at the tail end of X-Men Inferno. She also blames the New Mutants for what happened to the school, not knowing it was really the X-Men fault for what happened to the school. Because remember, when it comes to Kitty Pryde and most of the people of the world, they believe that the X-Men are dead. Let me explain. So back in Fall of the Mutants, you had the X-Men give up their lives on live television to stop the adversary. Now, when they did that, the world believed the X-Men had died that day, not knowing that shortly after, they were brought back to life by Lady Roma. But when it came to the X-Men, they felt like it was best for the world to believe that they were dead, so that they'll be able to take down their enemies without putting their family and friends in danger. But like we saw in earlier videos that we have did, you now have different characters now knowing that the X-Men are alive and well. Let me explain. You see, when it came to X-Factor, they had to fight alongside with the X-Men at the tail end of Inferno to stop Madeline Pryor. When it came to the New Mutants, they fought alongside with Colossus. So those two teams know about the X-Men. But when it comes to Excalibur, they don't know, because when it came to the Inferno event, like I said earlier, they did not cross over with any other X teams at all. They were on their own in the entire Inferno event. And so for Kitty Pryde, she believes that the X-Men are dead. But either way, you have Danny Moonstar say, listen, I know that you are upset with us. You are upset with us. But the thing is, we're trying our best to still carry on Charles Xavier's dream, just like you are, just like many people are across the world. And right now, the mutants need to stand together because currently the mutant race is facing so many different problems all at once. We have to work together to protect each other. And Kitty Pryde realized that Danny Moonstar is right. And so you have Kitty Pryde say, I'm sorry for yelling at you guys. Please forgive me. And everything is now good again between her and the New Mutants. But now we shift our focus over to Captain Britain, and you have him flying around New York hoping to find Megan. But here's the problem. See, while flying around, he does see a young woman and her son about to be hit by a car, and so he goes out of his way to protect them from the car. But the problem is his powers are beginning to not work properly. Like, yes, he was able to stop the car, but he was hit by the car and it sent him flying into a nearby store. That should not be happening at all. He should be able to just stand there, take the hit, and walk off like it was nothing. But unfortunately, it didn't work like that. Now, because he was sent flying through a building, it did rip his clothes. And so, unfortunately, he has to borrow some clothes from a nearby store. Now, after getting those Rachel's clothes, he wants to continue to find Megan. But like I said earlier, his powers are now beginning to not work properly, to the point where he can no longer fly. And so you do have a taxi driver offer to drive him around the city to help him find Megan. Now, when it comes to Megan, we see that she's still hanging out with the same girls we saw earlier who went out of their way to try to make her happy. Now, when it comes to Megan, yeah, she's happy. But here's the thing. When it comes to Megan, she has the ability to shapeshift. Now, the reason why I'm bringing that up because usually she can't control that power. But it seems right now that power has a mind of its own because she looks completely different. But she did not do that on purpose. Now, when it comes to her and the girls, they do begin to head towards a club. Now, when it comes to Megan, she does not want to go inside the club at all. Matter of fact, she is so scared because she is still thinking about the whole X-Men Inferno event, she has no idea what to do. But because of her fear of what could possibly happen, her powers once again go out of their way to change her appearance. And so now she looks completely different again. But after changing, she was confronted by another guy who could tell that she was kind of sad. But at the same time, this guy also is trying his best to get with Megan, to get some from Megan. And so after a while where it seems that he is trying to make her happy, once he reveals what he wants from her, she has to use her ability to shapeshift to scare him away, to leave her alone. And so now she's wondering what to do next in the big city. But now we have to shift our focus over to Jean Grey, who is currently taking care of Christopher, the son of Cyclops and Madeline Pryor. Now, when it comes to Jean Grey, she kind of feels like she is the mother to Christopher because Madeline was her clone, which means, yes, this could be her son in some kind of crazy way. But while you have Jean Grey going out of her way to take care of Christopher, on the outside of the base of X Factor, you have Rachel Summers there, just watching over Jean Grey and also Christopher. Now remember, when it comes to Rachel, her mind and his mind is connected. But on top of that, Jean Grey nor Cyclops know that Rachel Summers is their daughter. Matter of fact, Jean Grey still has not even met Rachel Summers by this point in Marvel Comics. But either way, you have Rachel very pleased to see that Jean Grey is okay, and so is Christopher. Now we're going to jump back over to Megan as a way to wrap up our coverage over Excalibur number 8. Now, when it comes to Megan, we do see her go to a nearby basketball court to watch a bunch of guys play basketball. Now, one of the guys do get injured, and she decided to jump in for that guy to keep the game going. But right after she did that, you had Brian driving by and seeing her. Now, Brian tries his best to fly over the crowd to get to her, but like I said earlier, when it comes to Brian, Captain Britain, his powers are not working properly, but he still was able to somewhat fly over the crowd. Now, while doing that, Megan saw him, ran towards him, and kissed him, and you have both characters get back inside the taxi. Now, once inside the taxi, you have both characters tell each other that their powers are not working properly. But the big question is, why? Why are their powers not working? We saw Rachel, her power worked fine. We saw Nightcrawler, same thing too, and even Kitty Pryde as well. But the thing is, we are not given an answer in this particular chapter. That means down the road in later videos that we are going to do, we'll learn why their powers are not working.